What I'm about to show you is the most terrifying survival challenge in human history. And here's the thing. I've studied this for months, I've talked to historians, and I'm telling you right now, if you were sent back to 1348, you would die, and I'm going to prove it. You wake up, you check your phone, you grab an energy drink, you complain about your Wi-Fi being slow. Your biggest problem today is deciding what to watch on Netflix. Your life is easy. But what if you woke up here? This is London, 1348, and I'm not exaggerating when I say, this is the end of the world. The Black Death is about to kill 50% of Europe. That's 25 million people. In 5 years. To put that in perspective, if this happened today, it would be like 200 million Americans dying by 2030. And here's what makes this the ultimate thought experiment. You have 7 days. You have your modern brain, your 21st century knowledge, but none of your modern tools. No antibiotics, no phone, no Google. Could you survive? Let's find out. All right, time traveler, welcome to day 1. You just woke up in a medieval inn, and your first challenge isn't the plague. It's staying conscious long enough to face it, because the smell is going to knock you out. You think I'm joking? Let me paint you a picture. You open your eyes. The room is dark. There's no electricity. There's a window, but it's covered in oiled cloth, not glass. The bed you're on? It's a straw mat filled with lice, fleas, and probably a family of rats. You stand up, walk to the window, and look outside. And what you see changes everything. In the next 60 seconds, I'm going to show you the 3 things that will try to kill you before the plague even finds you. And the third one, nobody sees it coming. First, the streets. There are no sewers. People are throwing their chamber pots, that's their poop and pee, directly out their windows into the street. That slop, it's mixing with animal waste, rotting food, and dead animals. The street isn't paved, it's mud made of human waste. Second, the people. See that guy? He hasn't bathed in months, maybe years. Medieval people believed bathing was dangerous, that it opened your pores to disease. The irony? Not bathing is what's killing them. Everyone is covered in fleas and lice, and those fleas are carrying something we'll get to later. Third, the water. You see that river? It looks beautiful, right? Wrong. That's an open sewer. People are dumping bodies in it. They're washing clothes in it. They're dumping factory waste in it. And they're drinking from it. Challenge number 1. You're thirsty. What do you drink? If you said water, you're dead. 1 sip of that river water and you'll get dysentery, cholera, or typhoid. You'll be dead from diarrhea before the plague even knows your name. The correct answer? Beer. Medieval people drank weak beer for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Why? Because the brewing process killed the bacteria. You just survived day 1. Barely. Day 2. You survived the smell, you avoided the water, you're hungry and exhausted, but you're alive. Now comes the real challenge, avoiding the plague itself. And here's where everything you think you know is wrong. Pop quiz. What spreads the Black Death? If you said rats, you just failed history class. The real answer is going to blow your mind. For 600 years, everyone blamed rats. We all learned it in school. The rats carried the fleas bit humans. Humans died. Simple, right? Wrong. In 2018, scientists ran the numbers. They studied the spread patterns, the speed of infection, and they discovered something terrifying. The plague spread too fast for rats. A rat colony might infect a few houses, maybe a street. But the Black Death jumped from London to Paris to Venice in weeks. That's impossible. Unless the real killer was us, humans, specifically the fleas and lice living on humans. In a world where nobody bathes, where people sleep 10 to a room, where clothes are never washed, every single person is a walking plague bomb. That person you're talking to, their fleas are jumping onto you right now. That door handle you just touched, contaminated. That coin you used to buy bread, the last person who touched it died yesterday. And here's the real nightmare. It's not just fleas. The plague has 3 forms. Bubonic plague, spread by fleas. You get the buboes, the lumps I'll tell you about later. 60% fatality rate. You have maybe 4 to 7 days. Pneumonic plague, This is airborne. Someone coughs near you, you breathe it in, your lungs fill with blood. 95% fatality rate. You have 24 to 48 hours. Septicemic plague. This goes straight to your bloodstream. Your fingers and toes turn black. That's why it's called the Black Death. 100% fatality rate. You're dead in hours. Challenge number 2. You're in a marketplace. Someone near you starts coughing. What do? A. Move away slowly. B. Run. C. Cover your face. The answer is B. Run. If that's pneumonic plague, every second you breathe that air is a death sentence. Forget being polite, forget social norms. You run and you don't look back. But here's the plot twist that changes everything. Even if you run, even if you avoid every sick person, you still have a 50-50 chance of dying. And I'm about to tell you why, and the most disturbing fact of this entire video. They didn't know about germs. Think about that. Germ theory isn't discovered until the 1860s. That's 500 years in the future. To medieval people, disease is magic. It's invisible. It's unexplainable. It's God's will. They have a theory, though. It's called miasma, bad air. They believe that smells cause disease, that if you smell something bad, you get sick. So their solution: make things smell good. They burn incense. They carry flowers. They stuff pomanders with cloves and walk around sniffing them like their life support. And when that doesn't work, when people keep dying by the thousands, they come up with the only explanation that makes sense to them. God is angry. Think about the psychology of that. You're watching everyone you know die. Your friends, your family, your neighbors. Bodies are piling up in the streets. And the only explanation your society has is that you deserved this. That you sinned. That God himself is punishing humanity. How do you fight that? How do you survive not just the disease, but the complete collapse of meaning itself? The answer is, you probably don't. And day 3 is where most people die. Here's why. Day 3. You wake up. And immediately, you know something is wrong. You have a fever. Your head is pounding. Your muscles ache. You think maybe it's just the flu, right? Maybe you ate something bad. And then, you feel it. In your armpit. Or your groin. Or your neck. A lump. You touch it. It's hot. It's swollen. It's the size of an egg, and it's growing. That's a bubo. And your survival just became a coin flip. In the next 2 minutes, I'm going to describe exactly what happens to your body during the plague. And I'm warning you, this is going to be the most disturbing part of this video. But you need to hear it, because this is what 25 million people experienced. Stage 1, the infection, 0 to 24 hours. The bacteria Yersinia pestis enters your body through a flea bite. It travels to your lymph nodes. These are like the security checkpoints of your immune system. Your body says, "Wait, what's this?" and sends white blood cells to fight it. Stage 2, the swelling, 24 to 48 hours. But the bacteria is winning. Your lymph nodes swell with pus, blood, and dead cells. This is the bubo. It's not just a lump, it's a battle. Your own immune system is being destroyed from the inside. The pain is so intense that people can't move their arms or walk. Stage 3, the spread, 48 to 72 hours. The bacteria enters your bloodstream. Your fever spikes to 104 degrees. You start hallucinating. Your skin develops black patches. This is tissue death. Your blood isn't clotting properly. You're bleeding internally. Stage 4, the end, 72 plus hours. If the buboes don't kill you, the sepsis will. Your organs shut down one by one. Kidneys, liver, heart. Some people get the pneumonic version. They cough up blood and drown in their own lungs. The lucky ones, they die in their sleep. The unlucky ones are conscious until the very end. Survival rate without treatment, 40% at best. Survival rate with medieval treatment? Let me tell you about that. So you're lying there, dying, and you do the only thing you can do. You call for the doctor. Oh no, oh no. You just made a huge mistake. I'm about to show you the 3 cures that medieval doctors actually used. And here's the catch. All 3 of them make things worse, way worse. This is a plague doctor. And that mask? That terrifying bird mask? It's not what you think. That beak isn't a filter for germs. Remember, they don't know germs exist. That beak is stuffed with herbs, flowers, and spices, rose petals, lavender, camphor. They believe if they can't smell the bad air, they can't get sick. This is the 14th century equivalent of closing your eyes so the monster can't see you. It doesn't work. Plague doctors have a mortality rate almost as high as their patients. But you're desperate. You're dying. So the doctor examines you, sees your buboes, and offers you the cure. And I'm going to give you the Black Plague Medical Challenge. Which of these medieval treatments gives you the best chance? The doctor takes out a knife or attaches leeches to your body. The theory? Your body has too much bad blood, and they need to drain it out to restore balance. Here's what actually happens. You're already fighting a massive infection. Your body needs every resource it has. And now they're taking your blood. You become weaker, more dehydrated, more vulnerable to sepsis. Your blood pressure drops. You go into shock. Bloodletting doesn't cure the plague. It just helps you die faster. Survival rate, maybe 10%. And that's being generous. I am not making this up. This is real medieval medicine. The doctor takes a live chicken, shaves its rear end, and straps it directly to your bubo. The chicken is supposed to suck out the poison through some kind of mystical transference. What actually happens? The chicken freaks out, scratches you, possibly makes the infection worse, and then dies. Now you have a dead chicken strapped to your armpit, and you still have the plague. One medieval text actually says, if the chicken dies, apply another chicken. They weren't even trying to cure you. They were using chickens as plague detectors. Survival rate, same as doing nothing, but now you smell like chicken. Option C, Theriac, medieval poison cocktail. The doctor pulls out a bottle of thick, dark liquid. This is Theriac, sometimes called Venice treacle. It's supposed to be a cure-all medicine. What's in it? Opium, viper flesh, cinnamon, myrrh, wine, and depending on the recipe, up to 70 other ingredients, including crushed gemstones and unicorn horn, which was actually narwhal tusk. Some doctors added mercury or arsenic because they believed you could fight poison with poison. You can't. You're just adding mercury poisoning on top of the plague. Your gums start bleeding. Your teeth fall out. You go insane from the mercury. Survival rate, slightly worse than doing nothing. Here's the worst part. None of these work. Not one. And yet these were the best medical minds of the era. The University of Paris, the top medical school in Europe, issued an official report in 1348, explaining the plague was caused by a triple conjunction of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars in the 40th degree of Aquarius. Astrology. They blamed the planets. But wait, there's actually one medieval treatment that kind of worked. And when I tell you what it is, you're going to understand why so few people survived. Lancing the buboes. If you caught it early enough, and if a doctor manually cut open your buboes and drained the pus, and if, and this is a massive if, the wound didn't get infected, you might survive. Your odds went from 40% to maybe 50%. But think about what that means. No anesthesia. A doctor slicing open a lump in your armpit with a medieval knife. The pain is so intense people would pass out. And half the time, the lancing itself introduced new infections. This was your best option. Let that sink in. Day 4. By some miracle, you're still alive. Maybe you avoided getting infected. Maybe you survived the symptoms. But now comes the hardest challenge of all. People. What I'm about to show you is more terrifying than the disease itself. Because this is what happens when an entire civilization watches itself die. Doctors abandon their patients. Why risk death for a fee when money means nothing if you're dead? Priests refuse to give last rites. The very people whose job was to comfort the dying were running away in terror. And parents. Parents abandoned their own children. Giovanni Boccaccio, who lived through the plague, wrote this in the Decameron. Father abandoned child, wife husband, one brother another. The city was full of corpses. They were dumped in mass graves, layer upon layer, like lasagna. He compared human mass graves to food. That's how desensitized people became. Bodies piled up so fast that gravediggers couldn't keep up. In London, they opened emergency plague pits, mass graves that held thousands of bodies. One pit discovered under modern-day Smithfield held 25,000 skeletons. Think about that number. 25,000 people. That's a sold-out stadium. All dead. All buried in a hole. But some people didn't run. Some people went insane in a different way. They formed groups called flagellants. These were religious extremists who believed the plague was punishment from God, and that if they punished themselves, God would forgive humanity. So they walked from town to town in processions of hundreds, stripped to the waist, whipping themselves with leather straps embedded with metal spikes. They would whip themselves 33 times, once for each year of Christ's life, until their backs were shredded and bloody. They believed their suffering would end the plague. Instead, all they did was spread it, because they traveled from town to town, bringing their fleas with them. They were walking biological weapons who thought they were saints. The church eventually banned them, not because they were insane, but because they were starting to claim they didn't need the church, that they had a direct line to God. Even in the apocalypse, it's about power. But the absolute darkest part of the Black Death wasn't the disease. It was what humans did to other humans. This next part is the hardest to talk about. But it's essential, because it shows that sometimes the real monsters aren't the invisible bacteria, they're us. When people are terrified, when the world is ending, when nothing makes sense, they look for someone to blame. And in 14th century Europe, they found their scapegoat, Jewish communities. The accusations were insane. People claimed Jewish communities were poisoning the wells, that they were in league with the devil, that they caused the plague intentionally. None of this was true. In fact, Jewish communities had lower death rates, not because of conspiracy, but because Jewish religious law required ritual washing and cleanliness. But facts didn't matter. In 1349, in Strasbourg, 2,000 Jewish people were burned alive in a single day. In Mainz, in Cologne, in Basel, entire communities were murdered. This happened across Europe. Thousands died, not from plague, but from human hatred. And here's the thing that should haunt us. It didn't stop the plague. Of course it didn't. But it did destroy communities that had lived in Europe for centuries. The Jewish communities of the Rhine Valley were essentially wiped out, not by disease but by their neighbors. This is what happens when society collapses. This is the real survival challenge. Not just surviving the disease, but surviving each other. Day 5. Fields are empty. Crops are rotting. Shops are closed. The entire economy has stopped. Why work when you might be dead tomorrow? Why plant crops you won't live to harvest? Food prices skyrocket. Then they crash because there's no one to buy. Then there's no food at all because farmers are dead. A wheel of cheese, if you can find one, costs more than a month's wages. Money becomes meaningless. What good is gold when there's no bread to buy? Some people resort to looting, others to violence. The thin veneer of civilization is completely gone. Day 6. You've somehow made it this far. You've avoided infection. You've found food. You've stayed away from the sick. But now you face a new challenge, the psychology of survival. You've watched people die around you, your neighbors, maybe your family, and you're still here. Why? Medieval people believed in divine providence, that God chose who lived and died. So if you survived, were you blessed? Or were you next? The paranoia is overwhelming. Every cough is a death sentence. Every fever is the plague. You stop trusting everyone. You stop touching anything. You become a hermit in a world of hermits. Some survivors went the opposite direction. They threw massive parties, drank, ate, celebrated being alive. The Italian poet Petrarch wrote about people who decided, since death is inevitable, let us enjoy life. They called these parties dances of death. Others became hyper-religious, convinced they were spared for a purpose. Others fell into deep depression. There was no therapy, no support groups. You just endured. Day 7. You survived. By some combination of luck, knowledge, and paranoia, you made it 7 days. But could you have? Really? Let's be honest. The only reason you would survive is because you know something they don't. Germ theory. You'd know to boil your water. You'd know to wash your hands. You'd know to avoid sick people, not because of bad air, but because of invisible bacteria. You'd know that the cures are poison and the treatments are useless. You'd know to isolate yourself, to avoid crowds, to stay away from flea-infested materials. You have 650 years of scientific progress in your brain. You're a time traveler with a cheat code. And even then, your odds are maybe 60%, because you can't avoid fleas forever. You can't avoid breathing. You can't avoid human contact entirely. Without modern antibiotics, even with perfect hygiene, you'd still roll the dice every single day. The legacy. The Black Death killed 50% of Europe, but it didn't just kill people. It killed an entire way of life. Feudalism, the system where peasants were tied to land owned by lords, was broken. Why? Because suddenly there weren't enough workers. For the first time in history, peasants could demand wages. They could move to different lands. They could say, "Pay me more, or I walk." The power structure that had existed for 800 years crumbled. The labor shortage was so severe that England passed the Statute of Laborers in 1351, trying to force wages back down. It didn't work. You can't legislate away death. The old world was gone, and from those ashes came the Renaissance, a cultural explosion of art, science, and philosophy. Why? Because the survivors realized life was short, that authority could be wrong, that maybe, just maybe, humans could figure things out for themselves. The printing press, perspective in art, scientific method, the Protestant Reformation, the Age of Exploration. All of it traces back to the survivors of the Black Death deciding the old ways didn't work anymore. So the next time you wash your hands, drink clean water, or take an antibiotic, remember, you're living in the paradise built on the greatest survival challenge the world has ever known. The Black Death wasn't just a disease, it was a test of medicine, of society, of faith, of humanity itself. And we barely passed. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe because next week I'm covering something even crazier. What would happen if you tried to survive the Mongol invasions? And trust me, Genghis Khan makes the plague look like a vacation. See you then.